Joe Biden says he's getting closer to choosing a running mate while adding yet another name to the top of his short list. CBS News says Lerner, the presumptive Democratic nominee, has asked Senator Amy Klobuchar to undergo formal vetting. Biden was asked about this last night on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert.
Yeah, like on the campaign trail when Amy Klobuchar would fundamentally disagree with you, and yet you guys are still friends. So is she on the short list?
No. By the way, Amy's first rate. Don't get me wrong.
So she's first on the list.
Well, I'm not getting into that. But the truth is that
get into it.
Everybody disagreed with me on the campaign trail.
CBS News 2020 campaign reporter Bo Erickson has been covering Biden on the campaign trail and now on the virtual trail. All right, Bo, so there's a lot to talk about. Let's begin with the vetting process. Who else is being considered? It used to be back in the old days, Bo, before you were born, that if you were being considered to be a vice president, you wouldn't really tell the press, but that's changed in 2020.
Well, now we all have access to cameras in our house, and of the virtual campaign, I guess a lot of people have more things to say. So for the past couple of weeks, my colleagues and I in the political unit here at CBS have been reporting on this initial stage of the vetting process for the Biden campaign. And several of the women who the campaign is looking at have either said or we've reported on that they're in the process. This is Congresswoman Val Demings, both the senators from New Hampshire, and then Governor Gretchen Whitmer from Michigan, and Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham from New Mexico. Yesterday at CBS News, we reported that Amy Klobuchar is also in that mix. Last night, as we just heard that clip from the Colbert Show, Joe Biden confirmed that the actual deep vetting process, the interviews, the diving through personal documents like taxes, that process has not started with, and that is our understanding as well as the process. He said last night that they're just kind of wrapping up this preliminary effort right now. And as you mentioned, it's very interesting that there's been kind of this two-lane street going on here, and some women are publicly campaigning for it, and then there's women like Amy Klobuchar who have really not said anything about the vice presidential vetting process yet. But this morning she was asked about our reporting, and this was on WCCO radio in Minneapolis, and she said, "I think you are going to hear a lot of rumors," but she said she would not get into the details of what she knows.
So another candidate, if you will, in the Veep stakes, rumored, is Elizabeth Warren. She spoke recently about her position on healthcare. She said that she'd like to see improvements in healthcare, and that I think that she wanted the Affordable Care Act to be strengthened, which is a bit of a departure from her Medicare for All stance. Is she softening her perspective on healthcare, perhaps to align herself a little bit better with Joe Biden?
She's definitely softening her stance on healthcare. Her and Joe Biden had a lot of back and forth throughout the past year of the campaign during the primary. At one time, she accused him of running for the wrong party's nomination for president because of his healthcare stance. He, on the other hand, called her views elitist and said that she knew better than what people could do for themselves for healthcare. And so it seems like we're kind of getting beyond that now, because as you mentioned, she is now taking kind of the Joe Biden approach that we must fix the problems with Obamacare right now and build on that system. Elizabeth Warren then goes on to say, once we do that, we can move to that single-payer Medicare for all system that her and Bernie Sanders really pushed throughout the primary.
All right, Bo. Earlier, as you know, the former vice president appeared on the show The Breakfast Club. The interview got a little contentious as Biden was pressed on his previous voting records, including the 1994 crime bill. And that is what Charlemagne the God is known for doing in his interviews. He presses people. Here's what Vice President Biden said about his stance on criminal justice reform.
No one should be going to jail for drug crime, period. Nobody. No matter what the crime, particularly marijuana, which makes no sense for people to go to jail. They should be just wiped out completely. And the reason is that, if anything, for those crimes that are actually continue to be crimes, scheduled crimes, which marijuana shouldn't be anymore, what is happening is you shouldn't go to prison. You should go to a mandatory rehabilitation.
And Bo, that wasn't the only thing that has a lot of people buzzing right now. It was something that he said at the very end of the interview that is exploding Twitter. So take us through some of these controversial remarks the former vice president made, and what are you hearing from the campaign at all since that interview aired?
Well, this interview definitely woke a lot of people up this morning. The issues that Charlemagne the God was hitting on were issues that we heard a lot about from Joe Biden's former primary rivals basically a year ago. They really tried to relitigate the 1994 crime bill, and that was when Joe Biden was a senator at that time, and he was one of the big pushers of that bill. He said it was his bill, and he worked with President Clinton on it. So today in the interview, he actually tried to kind of reframe what he supported and what he didn't support at the time, but knowing now in 2020 that all these elements have passed. For instance, he cited that he did not support mandatory minimums. Our reporting and the record will show otherwise. And so it's kind of relitigating the issue, and this is maybe something that we're going to hear from the Trump administration coming forward to in the Trump campaign, because as you know, they also did some criminal justice reforms a couple of years ago that actually reversed a lot of the elements in the Joe Biden crime bill in 1994. And just because he mentioned it at the end, he was kind of going back and forth with the host, Charlemagne the God, and Charlemagne was pressing him on what Diddy actually said, that Democrats take black voters for granted. And Joe Biden says, oh, no, not me. They are the ones that brung me to the dance, is what he said. And then at the very end, he said, if voters cannot decide between Joe Biden and President Trump, then you are not black. That's what he said.
Yeah, Vlad, you informed me that the hashtag is trending. We'll see how that goes over the course of the day. Before we let you go, though, I sort of wanted to ask you one more thing. In regards to his record, you know, he's been in Washington for a really long time, so there's plenty to pick apart if you want to. I'm wondering, as you've been talking to Democratic voters and Democrats throughout various states, how important is that to them? I mean, do they look at his record prior to becoming the VP, or are they more focused on, you know, the years that he spent in the White House working with Barack Obama?
It's a very interesting question because it was really split among the Democratic voters that we were speaking to out on the campaign trail. If you supported Joe Biden, you came up with reasons to say that the legislation that he supported, either that is what was common thought back at that time, for instance, 1994, and they also would cite also at the time that the Congressional Black Caucus, the majority of those members also supported legislation like these tough on crime bills as well. But then there's this whole other group, and what I can predict probably maybe what some of the Republicans will do, that say Joe Biden needs to answer for what he pushed in Congress when he was a senator, but at the same time, you have people saying, well, if it wasn't an issue for Barack Obama to pick him as a vice presidential running mate, then why is it an issue for me? That's kind of the refrain we hear over and over again.
Interesting stuff. Bo, thank you so much.